The night bled red over the Arizona desert. A single figure stumbled through the dust, barefoot, her hair tangled with sagebrush and blood. The wind carried the cries of coyotes, but they didn't dare come near. Something about her wild eyes and the way she clutched the knife in her hand made even the scavengers uneasy. She had escaped. The Apache woman had fled her own people, from judgment, from punishment. Her name was Noya, meaning, rain that never comes. They had branded her a traitor for defying a tribal decree, for sparing a white man. The man had been tied to a post, arrows aimed at his chest, when she cut his ropes and whispered, "Run." That mercy sealed her fate. Now, hunted by her kin and by white soldiers alike, she was nothing but a fugitive shadow in the wasteland. 3 days without food, 2 without water. When she saw smoke rising from the valley below, her knees buckled. She crawled down the rocks, whispering to the dying moon, "If death comes, let it wear a kind face." It wasn't death waiting, it was a man. A lean, bearded figure sat by a dying campfire, mending a saddle strap. He looked up as she stumbled into his camp, ragged, barefoot, trembling like a wounded doe. His hand went instantly to his rifle. "Don't move another inch," he said, his voice low and cold as steel. She raised her hands, her knife clattering to the dirt. Her words came out broken, thick with her native tongue's rhythm. "No fight. No harm. Water, please." The man's name was Jed Coulter, a prospector who'd lost more dreams than gold could ever buy. His cabin lay a mile north, a broken thing, like the man himself. He had seen savagery. He had buried a wife under the same desert sky years ago. He knew danger when it walked into his firelight, and this woman was danger wrapped in beauty and desperation. But something in her eyes stopped him. Maybe it was the raw pleading, maybe the haunting emptiness. He hesitated, then tossed her his canteen. She drank like she was swallowing life itself. When she looked up, tears streaked her dust-caked cheeks. "Thank you," she whispered. "You are, good man." "Don't be so sure," Jed muttered. "What's your name?" "Noya." He studied her, the war paint half faded on her face, the bruises around her wrists. "You running from someone?" She nodded. "From all." The fire crackled between them. In that silence, the desert breathed, coyotes cried again, wind hissed through mesquite. Something old, wild, and dangerous hung in the air. At dawn, Jed saddled his mule and started to leave. But she followed. He turned sharply. "You can't come with me." "I help," she said, clutching her torn shawl. "I can wash your feet, make fire, cook. I can be your mate, give you offspring." Her voice cracked on that last word, but her eyes didn't flinch. Jed froze, shocked. For a long moment, he just stared. Then he barked out a bitter laugh. "You don't even know me, girl. You don't know what you're offering." "I know hunger," she said softly. "And I know a man who gives water is not evil." He turned away, jaw tightening. "You're gonna get yourself killed following me. Then I die behind you, not in the sand." That night, they reached his cabin, half-rotted timber leaning against a cliff, the wind howling through the cracks. He lit a lamp, and she stood by the doorway like a ghost afraid to enter the living world. "Inside," he said finally. "You look like you'll fall over." She hesitated, then stepped in. Her eyes scanned the simple room, a cot, a stove, a Bible on the shelf covered in dust. She touched it lightly, tracing the name carved on its spine, Sarah Coulter. "Your woman?" she asked. He nodded once. "Was." Noya said nothing more. But that night, while he slept, she swept the floor, mended the torn curtain, and cooked what little beans and jerky he had left. When he woke, the cabin smelled like life again, something it hadn't done in years. Days passed. She worked silently, tending the fire, washing his clothes, following him to the creek where she filled buckets and watched for snakes. Jed found himself watching her, not with desire, but with a kind of ache he couldn't name. He tried not to care. She was trouble. And yet, every time she smiled, it chipped a piece off the wall around his heart. Then, one morning, hoofbeats thundered down the ridge. He looked out, saw 3 Apache riders, faces painted for war. His blood ran cold. Noya froze by the window. "They find me." "Get down," Jed hissed, grabbing his rifle. But it was too late. The riders dismounted and shouted something in Apache. Noya's face went pale. "They say, return to die with honor." Jed stepped forward. "Over my dead body." "Jed, no," she cried. "They will kill you too." He cocked the rifle. Ain't the first time I stared down death. Get behind me. The leader of the riders, an older warrior with scars on his face, called out again, his voice deep, commanding. Jed didn't understand the words, but he understood the intent. The first arrow hissed through the air, and missed his head by inches. Jed fired back, dropping one of the riders. The other two retreated behind rocks, firing arrows. Noya screamed, running to the window. Stop, please, she shouted in Apache, her voice breaking. Leave him, he is not your enemy. One of the men hesitated, then shouted something cruel in return. She flinched as though slapped. Jed dragged her down. You can't reason with them. Tears streamed down her cheeks. They say I dishonor my blood. That my spirit belongs to the white man now. He gritted his teeth. Then we'll show him what your spirit's worth. The fight raged until sundown. When silence finally fell, only dust and blood hung in the air. The riders were gone, 2 dead, 1 fleeing into the hills. Jed's arm was bleeding, but he was alive. Noya knelt beside him, pressing cloth to the wound, trembling. You saved me again. Why? He looked at her, really looked. The dirt, the scars, the fire in her eyes. Because you were right. You ain't evil. You just needed someone to believe you still got a right to live. That night, as the stars scattered over the desert sky, she sat by his side. The air was cold, the silence deep. You said you can give me offspring, he murmured, half smiling through the pain. She met his gaze, unflinching. I said because I thought that was what man wants. But now, I see not all men the same. Jed nodded slowly. No, some just want peace. She touched his hand. Then I will stay, and be your peace. Weeks turned into months. Spring painted the desert with wildflowers. Noya planted corn behind the cabin, taught Jed the songs her mother used to hum by the river. He taught her to read English, to ride a mule, to laugh again. But peace never lasts long in the West. One evening, soldiers came, a patrol from Fort Bowie. They'd found the Apache bodies and followed the trail straight to Jed's cabin. The lieutenant eyed Noya coldly. That's an escaped prisoner. She's wanted for aiding hostiles. Jed's hand went to his gun. She's done no wrong. She's Apache, the officer sneered. That's wrong enough. Before he could move, Noya stepped forward, raising her hands. Please, I go with you. Do not hurt him. Jed caught her wrist. No, you ain't going anywhere. She turned to him, eyes soft. You gave me life, Jed. Now let me save yours. The soldiers took her away in irons. Jed stood in the dust long after they vanished, the silence cutting deeper than any wound. Weeks later, word reached him, the woman had escaped again. No one knew how. Some said she vanished into the desert like a ghost, leaving no tracks. Then, one morning, Jed woke to the sound of singing. A low, familiar hum carried on the wind. He stepped outside, and there she was, standing by the cornfield, sunlight on her hair, a basket in her hands. She smiled. Rain came last night, she said softly. The corn will grow strong. Jed couldn't speak. He just walked to her and took her hand, rough against his. And in that silence, under the blood-red dawn, the desert finally breathed again, alive, forgiven, and free.